Over the last 6 months, I've been working on a school art project, but not just any boring school art assignment, no. Instead, I was given the chance to design my own manga by the end of the year. Never did I think that high school art classes could be this cool. You're telling me I get to make a comic and it'll be worth a large portion of my total grade for the year? That's way better than like a Photoshop assignment. And on top of that, I've made a manga before. This is gonna be totally free. Give me that A+ right now. Little did I know, undertaking this project would have me almost fail high school and be unable to get into university. See, this project required me to make everything, stuff I had never made before for manga. Here's a simplified list. You got a story synopsis, full character design sheets, environment concept pieces, page spreads, and even front and back cover art. Even though some of this may sound like standard stuff for making manga, and it probably is, it is stuff I had totally neglected last time I did this. I didn't even make a cover last time till 10 minutes before I posted my manga. And these people want me to make a detailed 18-layer collage of concepts so I can brainstorm possible compositions and colors for the final book cover? I only know 3 colors! So it's safe to say that with this being such a detailed assignment, me being under a time crunch, having exams and tests in the meanwhile, and having to make sure it's good so that I pass the school year, it's gonna be kinda difficult. Now before we start, there's a couple things you should know. First and most importantly, since this is such a huge project, I decided to split it up into pieces, otherwise this video would be an hour long. So I made the character design and environment concepting stages into their own videos. So if you want to see the project in its entirety, I recommend you go watch them. And second, there's a reason why the title says design a manga and not make a manga. Because thankfully, I was not asked to make a full comic book for this assignment, only several pages that prove I could. And I wanted to say this so you don't go into it expecting a fully fledged storyline and so you don't think it's going to be published anywhere. This quote-unquote manga is more like a series of pages taken from random moments in the story. By the way, if you want to see what grade I got for this assignment, stick till the end. Because even though I did this months ago, I actually got the results a couple days ago on the 14th of Jan. Okay, so first I'm going to tell you the story synopsis so you know what the manga I'm making is even about. So for this assignment, we were told to basically choose an already existing movie or series or comic or novel or anything like that and basically try and adapt it into a picture book, in my case a manga. So yeah, I decided to do it on a tale from a Persian book of epics, specifically Zahak's tale, which I think is really cool. So yeah, the manga I ended up making does not do that story justice at all, but a lot of the key aspects are still the same. So yeah, it's about this corrupt king with snakes coming out of his shoulders, for a reason that I'm not going to explain right now, who's destroying his kingdom and killing the youth and, you know, all sorts of evil stuff. And it's about this blacksmith who leads a revolt against them with said youth. So yeah, we have our protagonist, the blacksmith, whose name is Kaveh, I think that's how you say it, and then the evil king, who is Zahak. Okay, so like I said, because the amount of pages I have to work with isn't as much as I'd have in like a full manga chapter or anything like that, I have to be pretty smart with what I choose to show and what I don't. So it basically comes down to 3 different scenes that I'm going to be drawing. And each of them would show one step in Kaveh's journey to revolt against the king. Scene 1, which shows Kaveh in his blacksmith workshop making weapons, would be towards the beginning of the story. Scene 2, which is him taking the weapons to the refugees hiding in the mountains, would be towards the middle of the story, or maybe about 3/4 in. And scene 3, which actually shows the revolt against the king, would be at the very end. And while I'm doing each scene, I'll explain more about it in terms of what's happening in the story and what I'm required to do for the project. Okay, scene 1. Finally, we're actually at the drawing part. Now, the storyboards you're seeing me do here are actually based on some prior storyboards I did in school physically. So I'll put them on the screen for you right now. So as I explained briefly before, what's happening in this scene is we basically have our main character or protagonist, Kaveh. He's in his blacksmith workshop working on weapons, and he's visited by this messenger from the king who's here to collect on a debt he owes. Basically, the king wants him to make weapons for him, but he doesn't like the king, so there's some underlying tension there. And you'll find out in the next scene what he ends up doing with those weapons. So page 1, which is on the left, starts with an establishing shot outside of Kabe's house or workshop or whatever you want to call it, and we see that the messenger is standing there getting ready to go inside. And then it goes into another establishing shot. This time we're introduced to the interior of the building, where we see Kabe working on his weapons, and then we actually see the messenger walk in and Kabe's brief reaction to it. Okay, now I need to quickly explain some project details, or what the assignment actually requires me to do. So even though I'm only asked to draw about 2 pages per scene, which makes it sound really simple and easy, because it's a school project, it's never really that simple. And what they want you to do is make 3 different renditions of the same 2 pages and then pick which is your favorite overall. That sounds really confusing. It is. It confused me too for a while. But basically, you see the 3 different spreads I have open on the left side of the screen. Those are all for the same scene. It's just I have to make different versions of it and then pick which is my favorite and call that my final. That probably still sounds confusing, but hopefully it'll make more sense towards the end when you see the actual finished drawings. All you need to know is that we're basically working on the same 2 pages, evolving them, and then picking which page is my favorite. Also, from now on, I'm going to call them spreads, which would be page 1 and 2, because it's just easier. Now, another thing I have to do, because it's an art class assignment, is I have to color in the pages. And I understand that's not very manga-like, you know, usually they're just black and white. But again, it's an art class and they need to see how good your ability to color is. But in the end, I'll show you what the black and white versions would look like if you want to see the more manga-fied version, I guess. By the way, there might look like there's a big jump in the recording because 2 of the bigger panels get immediately filled out. But no, those are actually drawings I did in my last video as a part of the environment design section. One of the better parts of this project is that it lets you reuse drawings you've done previously, so you don't have to keep redrawing things. And last video I drew those environment pieces with the goal in mind of putting them in the manga panels. So it's not that I'm copy and pasting because I'm lazy. I just drew them on their own last video and then now I'm putting them in the actual panels. Anyway, then we have the 3rd panel, or the 2nd panel on the 2nd page, however you want to say it, which actually shows Kave like winding up to strike down with the hammer. I thought I should add that in because cutting to a shot of him immediately with the hammer already down on the anvil would be kind of abrupt, I guess. You know, it needs a little bit of wind up and anticipation. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with how it came out. I mean, it's a very simple drawing, right? And the next panel, this is actually the first time we see Kave's face in the story, so I wanted to make it a really interesting shot, which is why I decided to go with him striking down on the anvil. So yeah, I did this shot with the camera like facing up at him, which made him seem more like intimidating. And I thought subconsciously it would tell you a bit more about his character, because I'm trying to show, not tell, you know? Basically, I wanted him to seem like a tough guy without having him say some tough things. Okay, so that's the first rendition of scene 1. Now, like I said, we still have 2 more renditions to do, which is basically just me evolving them and making them better till I find my favorite. So for the 2nd rendition, I decided that page 1 needed a bit more in it, and I also wanted to make the messenger that's approaching the building seem a bit more intimidating. So I added another panel at the bottom of the page where you see the messenger's mask. I didn't really know how to draw chainmail, and that's what I wanted him to have on the front of his mask. So I came up with my own little method where you kind of draw it like fish scales almost, but I think it worked out quite nice. Obviously, if you see it with the colors and shading, it looks even better. And then on the 2nd page, I decided to shift around the panels from the first rendition I did because I wanted to make some more room to put an additional 2 panels in there. One which actually shows the messenger entering the building, and another which would show Kave's reaction to it. And if you notice, I pasted another drawing in there. This is something I did before as a part of a failed environment concept piece. I did draw it, I swear, it's not from the internet, but I did use reference for it, which is from Fight Class 3. But yeah, so I modified it a bit and expanded the drawing, and it ended up in a pretty cool panel. Anyway, so here we have the first rendition of scene 1, which is definitely the simplest one. You know, it has very little substance and it's kind of boring. And then the 2nd one, which is where I implemented all those changes, it's still missing quite a few details, but it's a big upgrade overall from the first one. And then for the 3rd one, I just decided to kind of mix and match certain elements that I liked from both the renditions. So I added the panel of him with his hammer in the air to kind of give more anticipation to his anvil strike. And I decided to expand certain panels and just make them bigger or zoom them out. Anything that would just help make it look better. Also, if you notice any dialogue, I made this all up on the fly, like while I'm actually drawing, so it doesn't really mean anything. That might make me sound lazy, but you know, it's an art assignment and you're not really graded on how good your writing is, just the art. Alright, scene 2. Again, I have some previously drawn storyboards, so I'll show them to you now while I explain what's going on in the scene. So it follows the last scene where we basically saw him making these weapons, and it shows us what he's actually going to do with the weapons. So hiding from Zahak, you know, the evil king, some people have taken refuge in this cave in the mountains, and basically Kaveh is taking these weapons to them to help him revolt against the king. So the scene starts off with this drawing I did in the last video of him overlooking this cave in the mountains. It's a pretty cool establishing shot in my opinion. And then we get another shot of him from the bottom up. And then page 2 is really simple. It just shows him walking over to the cave and then telling them to come out because he's got the weapons. Now, even though I had a good idea of what to do for this page, I still struggled quite a bit in terms of panels because for the life of me, I could not figure out like interesting things to add to these pages. So in this first rendition, what I did was after the establishing shot, I decided to add 2 panels where we see him from the bottom up standing on the cliff edge and another one when he's gone from the cliff edge. Pretty simple drawings, not much to say there. And then as I'm doing this, I'm also working on the second and third renditions just because I think it's more efficient to try and work on everything all at once. So for the second one, I decided to keep the panel of him from the bottom down on the cliff edge the same, but I decided to flip everything overall just to see how it would look if he was facing the other direction. And then for the third panel on the page, instead of the boring shot from before, I decided to make it a shot of his face because I thought it'd be important for us to have a good shot of him for this page and not just see him from the back or the side. So yeah, I did that and I really liked this shot. I think it ended up pretty cool. Maybe it's a little similar to the shot from the previous page. I guess I wasn't really thinking there, but... And then we actually see him with his green cloak on in this shot, which is also really cool. Now for the second page, I unfortunately forgot to record the first and second panels. Thankfully, they're not the most interesting panels, so you didn't really miss out on much. It's just 2 different shots of him walking up to the cave and then approaching the entrance of the cave. It ended up coming out really weird in terms of the page flow, which I don't really like. But luckily, that'll be fixed in the second rendition because he's facing the other direction. And then for the final panel of this spread, I decided it'd be more interesting to do a shot from inside of the cave of Kaveh looking in instead of having the camera be like behind him. So yeah, and that let me do this cool thing with silhouettes because obviously the cave is really dark and outside is really bright, so he'd kind of look really shadowy. I think my idea for this was really cool, but the actual execution was just kind of subpar. And then I added some speech bubbles of him saying, "Come out, I brought the weapons." So yeah, not the most interesting spreads. Obviously this first one is just horrid. It's way too boring and it's filled with the same kind of looking shots. Second one is a huge improvement. This is actually the third rendition, but I don't like it as much as the second one, so I'm showing it now. Obviously it's better than the first one because I decided to do this cooler thing with the first shot where it kind of bleeds into the other panel borders, but still the page flow just feels kind of weird because he's facing towards the left. So then you actually see the third one and now it's like it just makes a lot more sense, you know. He's on the left of the screen facing right, which kind of guides your eyes to the right. And yeah, in my opinion, it's just far better. And yeah, even though it might not have too much substance and it might be kind of boring, I think what I did with the first panel where it like bleeds into the other panel borders makes it just interesting enough to pass and be considered good. Okay, scene 3. I think this will likely be most people's favorite spread. I'd argue it's the most interesting one and also has some of the coolest drawings. So there's good news and bad news for this spread. The good news is that 2 of the bigger drawings in this page I've already done last video, so it kind of lightens the workload, I guess. But the bad news is that there is still 1 panel which required an immense amount of work and took 1 to 2 hours to do. So let me first explain what's actually happening in the scene. This is the first time we actually see Zahak, so I wanted it to be a really cool shot and I wanted him to take up most of the spread. And you might have noticed by now I'm doing like a big page-and-a-half spread of Zahak sitting on his throne, and I think the more space he takes up on the page, the more intimidating he'll seem. So anyway, we see him sitting on his throne saying something, we get another close-up on his eye, and then on the other side of the spread we see Kaveh waiting outside the castle with an army that's ready to revolt, I guess. And it's this one panel of the army that actually took the longest to do. Okay, first things first though, after the shot of Zahak sitting on his throne, we have a close-up on his eye. And I chose a close-up on his eye instead of his whole face because I thought you can show just as much emotion using it, and also the way the panel was shaped made it so an eye would fit better and take up most of the panel, whereas if I did his face I'd have to zoom it out a lot. So yeah, I actually struggled a lot more than I thought I would on this panel. It was mainly just the eyelashes. I don't know why, for the life of me I just couldn't draw them. I think the coloring came out pretty good though, and the rendering. It's pretty simple, but it's good enough. Anyways, then like I said, we have the panel of him looking up at the castle. I did change it a bit from last video. I decided to add these like light rays shining down, because if you look at Zahak sitting on his throne, there's like light rays coming through the ceiling, but then outside of the castle there's like dark clouds, so I thought that didn't make too much sense. But yeah, you'll see what I mean closer to the end. Anyway, then we have a shot of Kaveh turning his neck to talk to some people behind him, and he asks them if they're ready, to which we then cut to the panel I spent the longest drawing. Now first of all, I have to address this drawing of Kaveh because it is just horrid. I don't know why it came out looking so bad. It should be an easy position for me to draw, but it just looks so stiff and awkward. Anyway, then we have the actual army itself. So I decided to do a pretty detailed sketch for this because I thought to myself that the more detailed the sketch is, the easier it's going to be to just turn my brain off and do the line art. And yeah, I think I was right, because when it actually came time to do the line art, it was nowhere near as difficult as I thought it was going to be. This is the first time I'd ever done like a large crowd, ever. And it did not turn out as bad as I thought it would, which surprised me a lot. I thought I was going to be struggling so much during this, but no, it was just kind of free. I mean, it took a while to do, obviously, but I don't think I really struggled with anything. Now there's some like goofy looking poses or faces, like this one guy's armor looks kind of weird. I could have took my time and made it way better, but when we zoom out, you'll see how small this panel actually is, which is why I didn't want to spend too long on it, because I didn't want to draw details nobody would notice. And the coloring of it was pretty simple as well. I made the colors overall like pretty desaturated and brown. And by the way, adding shields in front of them, a 200 IQ move by me, because I made it so I have to draw less of the actual people because they're being covered up. Am I not a genius? Don't answer that. And by the way, if you're wondering how I did the swords, I actually did the swords on a completely separate layer. What I did was I drew their hands empty at first, and then drew just one sword, and then copy and pasted it into all of them. You don't know how much time this saved. Could you imagine if I tried to draw all those swords individually? That's another hour added on. But yeah, I don't have too much more to say about this panel. I did add some sound effects in the end, which you'll see, but yeah, other than that, a pretty solid panel. And then obviously I still had to do a third rendition of it. I decided to switch things up a bit, see how it would look if the shots were in different orders. But yeah, in my opinion, this is worse than the other one I did, so... Yep, so now we see the first, second, and third renditions of it. Anyway, the first one, obviously the least detailed one, and probably the most boring one. Then we have the second one, which has the 2 new panels added on, but it's in the page composition that I didn't really like. Not much to say about it there. I just think it makes it a little confusing what you're supposed to read next. And then obviously we have the third one, definitely my favorite. I think overall it's going to be most people's favorite in terms of which spread they like the most. Either this or the first spread I drew. But yeah, very solid spread overall. Cover art, isn't that crazy? I can't even remember the last time I tried to make an official cover for a book. It must have been like 5 years ago. So yeah, unfortunately I didn't record much at all for this step, so I'm just gonna explain the assignment now, and then afterwards we'll look at the finished covers together. So after you've done all the different scenes and all the different pages, they want you to make hypothetical cover art for your book, and this includes front cover, back cover, and the spine. And on top of this, you have to try and make it look as official as you can. You know, you need to put like publisher tags on there and R-rated warnings if that applies to your book, stuff like that. So I had to take this as seriously as I could. Now, even though this sounds easier than having to do all those pages, it was right up there with it in difficulty. See, what you have to do first is make 5 different concept pieces for the front cover, and then after that you have to narrow it down to 4. Keep in mind you're mix and matching while doing this, but after you've narrowed it down to 4 by mix and matching, you need to make 4 different concept spine covers and back covers at the same time. And this is just the second stage of 4, let me remind you. So after you've made 4 different concept front, back, and spine covers, you need to narrow those 4 down into 2 by once again mix and matching. And then finally, after you've done that, you mix and match one last time, or just develop one of them further into your final. And let me tell you, this was so tedious to do. At least when I was making the pages, I was having fun. In this, I was literally just copy and pasting certain elements, changing colors, moving text around. It was boring and difficult, and that's the worst matchup. Thankfully though, I do think it works because it ended up in some really cool covers, and let's just look at them now. So like I said, the first step was the 5 different concepts, and here they are now. First one was the cover I had in mind initially when I thought about what I wanted to make. I'm a big fan of like simplicity and trying to do the most with the least. By the way, I think I forgot to say, I made the title of the book Zahak mainly because I couldn't think of anything else. I tried ChatGPTing it, but it gave me some god-awful suggestions. So yeah, for the first one, I decided to make it entirely red and then also put his hammer on there. For the second one, I got inspiration from the One Punch Man covers. If you compare this to the One Punch Man cover, the similarities are pretty obvious. I think it was a cool idea, but I just didn't really have a good like pose or an image to put as the main subject of the cover, and I didn't want to draw anything new for it because remember, I was under a deadline and I was pretty stressed, and I didn't want to spend time doing something I didn't really have to. And the third one, I decided to see how it would look if instead of like a character or a prop, we put some environment art in there. It looked way better in my head, but I don't know, it just didn't come out too nice in the actual cover. The fourth one is the most graphically ambitious one. It's really abstract and there's a lot of like contrasting colors in there. I put Zahak on it, and then I also put the title of the book, so it's kind of covering him front down. I think if the actual drawing of Zahak was better, this would look 100 times better overall. And then for the last one, I decided to do kind of a more novel-esque cover. It's alright, I like some of the designs, but overall I just think it's a little too boring. And by the way, if you're wondering how I made the actual title itself, I'm not talking about picking the name, I'm talking about the actual drawing of it. I literally just found a font, wrote the title, and then brought the letter spacing down to make it so they're very close together. And then to finish it off, I added this like arrow in the middle to kind of make things more sharp. Now for the second stage, this is when I mixed and matched it and stuff, and I made it into 4 front covers, but it also includes the spine and back. So once again, for the first one, I decided to flip the hammer upside down from the last one, change the title color. I made things a bit more like vertical overall. The back isn't anything special, you know, there's a blurb on there, and I also added some like publisher tags. I literally had to invent my own like publishing company, so I came up with Z Media, and I also added like 13+ on there. The thing I like most about this cover though has to be the spine. I don't know why, it's so appealing to me. Now for the second one, I decided to cut out entirely the One Punch Man inspired one, and I kept the environment one. I decided to do this cool thing where the image goes from the front to the spine to the back, so it's all like one unified image. Again, it's that thing where it looks better in your head, and then when you actually see it, it's just subpar. Now the third one, this was the graphically ambitious one that's now developed further. I decided to make it half and half, so it's half Zahak and half Kaveh. And you know, green and red like hero and villain themed colors there. I think that's pretty cool. The spine of the book, nothing special. I'm not a fan of it if I'm being honest, but you know, you have to show to the people grading your work that you're experimenting with different stuff. And then the back of it was also cool as well. I decided to add a big letter 1 on the side of the page and then add a silhouette of Kaveh. I like it a lot. Again, in the next stages you'll see it developed further and it'll look way better. And then for the last one, we have the novelesque one again, but this time I decided to add Kaveh on the cover and also change the coloring of the title of the book. And then for the back of the book, I decided to make it novelesque to stick with the theme, you know. Nothing too special, but I also think it does suit the rest of the cover. I am actually a fan of the spine in this one. I think it looks very simple, but also very nice. The second to last stage. This is where everything gets narrowed down into 2, and it's right before I pick which one I want to stick with. So I cut out the one with Kaveh's hammer and also the environment heavy one, and I kept the graphically ambitious one along with the novelesque one, but obviously developed further. For the graphically ambitious one, I made a big leap here. I decided to get rid of the half and half idea entirely and make it so it's Kaveh on the back and Zahak on the front. And I kept everything just as vertical as it was before, but I kind of developed it even further. With the title of the book being black and the volume number being black, I think it does kind of conflict with Zahak because he's also pretty dark, so you know, it's not as apparent. And then going on to the second one, we have the novelesque one again. I changed the spine a bit, not a big fan of it, and I also made the overall color of the cover a bit more saturated, and I decided to add a hammer on the back of the cover as well. Not my favorite. I think most people don't like it as much as the top one. And then so obviously the final, it's gonna be the top one developed further. And as you can see, I changed some key stuff and I added some new stuff, which I think really helped finalize everything. I made it so number 1 on the back of the page kind of goes forward to the front as well, so it covers the spine and it makes it black, and it also covers half of the book title vertically. I think that was a very nice move by me. It was recommended by my teacher, so shout out to her. And then I also made the title and stuff white, which I think made them pop out a lot more as well. and I added these some like manga screen tones in the background. Very nice. I don't think I have any problems with it. Now, if you guys are noticing that these colors are kind of weird, I'm showing you physical images of what they look like printed out, so that's part of it. But also, when I did print them out, the colors kind of changed and became darker. Originally, the green and red were a lot brighter and it was a lot more visually appealing. That kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Okay, so before I show you the finished product of everything I did and give you my grade, I told you guys that I was going to show you the black and white versions of all the pages, so let's just quickly do that now. I bumped up contrast and brightness to try and make it a lot more black and white and manga-like. It's not bad. Obviously, it's not a true representation of what these pages would look like if I decided to do a black and white from the beginning, because I'd probably rely on like hatching and stuff a lot more. So yeah, not too bad, not too good either. I just wanted to show it to you guys because I said I would. And we're finally at the end. I mean, you guys have been watching this for what, like 20 minutes at this point? 25 minutes at this point, maybe? This was pretty much a year of schoolwork summarized into a 20-minute video. You don't know how long this took for me. And keep in mind, like I said, I had tests and exams and like other things to do in the meantime. So trying to balance this huge project with the rest of my school life, it was a pain. Anyway, so you guys might be wondering what you're looking at here. This is the finished artboard, basically, because the goal with this entire project, other than to, you know, design the manga itself, was to print everything out and stick it onto this giant artboard. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it's giant. This is 3 A2 boards. I can wrap this thing around myself like a blanket. Not that I would. Maybe. So let me explain what you're looking at. On the top left, we have the actual like story proposition thing where I explain to the people marking this what the story is about. And on the right of that, we have reference photos that I'm gonna censor out because I took pictures of people and they might not want me to share it. And then the rest of that first board is entirely dedicated to the character design stage of the project. So, you know, you have all the concepts, developments, and finals for my protagonist, Kaveh. And then at the bottom you have developments and final for the villain and antagonist, Zahak. Then starting off the second board, we have all the environment concept pieces. First without characters in them, and then second with the characters interacting with the environments. And then beneath that is where we started doing the actual pages themselves. So on the left you have the first and second renditions. And then on the right you have the finished spreads, and then it's also continued to the top of the third board with my last spread. And then finally the last stage of the project, beneath that is where you see all the different covers I did, which is the photos I was showing you guys before. This took such a long time. I already told you guys about it, so I'm not gonna keep yapping. I could, because that's just how many problems I had with this project. There was hiccup after hiccup after hiccup, and for the sake of keeping the video simpler and making sure I don't exposition dump you guys, I didn't leave in a lot of parts of me having problems. But you better believe I did have problems. This was hard, man. And would you believe me if after all of this, after all you've seen me do over the last 3 videos including this one, if I told you that the hardest part about this project was having to go to school for 4 days in a row on your holidays, a week before the exams, to try and print everything out and stick them onto this ridiculous board while there's 90 people waiting in line for a single printer? Well, actually, I bet you would, because I made it sound pretty difficult. But it was so difficult, man, and it gave me barely any time to study for my other exams, which is why I said I almost failed, because I almost did. So, after all this hard work, after all this turmoil, after all this anticipation, after me almost failing my other exams, my much more important exams, because of this, what grade do you think I got? Don't answer that, because unless you're in New Zealand, you're gonna have no clue what the grading system is. Drum roll, please. I got an E. Which is really good, by the way, because I'm in New Zealand and E is like the highest thing you can get. It stands for excellence. So it's pretty much like an A or an A+, or an A star for you British kids. So yes, thankfully, I got a very, very good grade for this, which probably saved my entire school year, if I'm being honest, because it was worth so many points and such a big percentage of my final grade. Anyway, now that this giant project is finally done, which is probably the reason I couldn't post a lot more videos last year, by the way, I can finally make some simpler videos about concepts I'm more excited about, videos that don't require me to sit behind my computer crying while I'm editing them. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this video and my last 2 videos if you have seen those. It was one hell of a journey. Yeah, I'm sorry if any of you were kind of misguided in terms of like what you thought this video was going to be. Again, I know it's not a traditional manga, I didn't even make a full manga chapter, but listen, do you know how insanely cool it is to even be able to do something remotely like this for a school art project? Who cares if it's not a full manga? Doing something even similar is a win in my books. But like I said, thank you guys for watching this. I have no clue what my next video is going to be about. It shouldn't take a month to do, so stay tuned, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video.